Cam Boucher Thomas, born October 13th, 2001. It happened again, y'all. Cam Thomas has been waived for the second time in one season by two teams with nothing to lose. No playoff hopes, no pressure to win, just opportunities to experiment, and somehow he still didn't stick. And that's what makes this situation hard to ignore, because we're not talking about a player who can't play. Cam Thomas can score with anybody. He's already shown that multiple times in this league. Big nights, quick bursts, stretches where he looks like the best player on the floor, but none of that has translated into stability. Instead, he's become one of the most confusing players in the league right now, a proven scorer who keeps getting moved like he's expendable. And at this point, it forces you to stop looking at the highlights and start asking, what is it exactly that teams are seeing that everyone else isn't? What happened? Let's talk about it. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth. Let's get it, man.
Everybody's happy I'm here. Everybody wanted me, so I feel great and can't wait to get on the court and help win.
Like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know who I should do next. Cam Thomas is a 6'4" guard from Chesapeake, Virginia, known early on for his natural scoring ability. He transferred to Oak Hill Academy for his junior season, one of the top high school programs in the country, where he built a reputation as a confident shot maker who could create offense from anywhere on the floor. Playing against elite competition, he stood out for his ability to score in isolation and take tough shots without hesitation and making a lot of them. He carried that same identity into college. At LSU, Thomas made an immediate impact as a freshman, averaging 23 points per game and leading the SEC in scoring during the 2020-21 season. He showed a polished offensive game, comfortable in the mid-range, capable from three, and aggressive attacking defenders. His ability to generate his own offense made him one of the most productive scorers in the country, despite being just a freshman. That production put him firmly on the NBA radar. He was selected 27th overall in the 2021 NBA draft by the Brooklyn Nets, entering a situation that already had established stars and championship expectations. From the start, his role was limited, as he wasn't brought in to lead, but rather to contribute within a deeper roster. Over his first few seasons, his role fluctuated. There were stretches where he broke out offensively, including multiple 40-point games, showing clear scoring talent at the NBA level. But those performances came within an inconsistent role as he was moved in and out of the rotation while the team continued adjusting its direction. Stunt number 1, draft status dictates opportunity. Cam Thomas entered the NBA as the 27th overall pick, and from that moment his path was already different from the players he'd eventually be compared to. Because in the NBA, where you're drafted doesn't just determine your starting point, it determines how much room you're given to grow. Late first-round picks are expected to earn everything. They're brought in to fit into what already exists, not to take over or reshape a team's direction, and that was Cam's situation from day one in Brooklyn. Even as the roster changed, his standing never fully shifted. He wasn't viewed as someone the franchise needed to build around, so his role stayed limited, not because he couldn't produce, but because the investment behind him didn't justify giving him full control. That's where the separation really happens. Top picks are developed through opportunity. They're given consistent minutes, freedom to make mistakes, and enough touches to grow into something over time because the team is committed to proving that investment right. Cam never had that level of backing. When he had big scoring nights, it didn't lead into a permanent change in how he was used. His minutes still fluctuated, his role still shifted, and instead of expanding, his game stayed contained within what the team needed in the moment. Because scoring like his requires rhythm, volume, and trust, and without those things, it becomes harder to establish consistency. Over time, that doesn't just affect production, it affects perception. Instead of being seen as someone who needed more opportunity, he became viewed as someone who could only operate in limited stretches, and once that label is attached, it becomes harder to break than anything he can show on the court. And the reality is, once a team decides what you are early on, the rest of the league tends to follow that lead. Brooklyn had the longest look at him, the most information, and the most reason to invest if they believed he was worth building around. When they didn't fully commit, it quietly signaled to everyone else how to approach him. So now, instead of being evaluated as a young scorer who needs a larger role, he's being treated like a situational player whose impact has limits. And that all traces back to where he started, because in the NBA, opportunity isn't just earned, it's often decided before you even step foot on the court. Stunt number 2, the black hole theory. Cam Thomas plays the game with a scorer's mindset, and to understand him, you have to understand what that really means, because scorers at his level don't think like everyone else on the floor. When they touch the ball, they're not reading the game the same way. They're seeing an opportunity to get a bucket, and they believe they can convert it no matter the situation. That belief is what separates them, but it's also what creates the perception around them. I call it the black hole theory. Once the ball goes in, it's probably not coming back out. Not because they're trying to be selfish, but because in their mind, the possession is already decided. And Cam isn't alone in that. You've seen it before with high-level scorers. Early career Kobe Bryant had stretches like this, and Carmelo Anthony built an entire career of being able to take and make tough shots over defenders, even when help was there. It's what makes them dangerous. It's also what made people question their style, because when it works, it looks unstoppable, but when it doesn't, it looks like someone forcing the game instead of playing within it. Cam falls into that same space. There's possessions where he gets the ball and you already know what's coming. The defense knows, his teammates know, and sometimes that predictability can stall an offense. Not because he can't score, but because the flow of the game shifts toward him exclusively. And when you're not an established star, that becomes a problem. Teams start to look at it as a disruption rather than a strength. And once you're labeled as someone who stops the ball, it doesn't matter how efficient you are in stretches, coaches are going to trust you less. They'll shorten your leash, pull you quicker, and hesitate to build anything around that style. And when that happens repeatedly, it starts to affect how you respond. There's been moments where Cam hasn't handled that well, whether it's visible frustration during games or pushing back against criticism of his style publicly. Because that mindset that got him here, that confidence, that belief, that willingness to take any shot, is what also makes it harder for a team to fully embrace him. It comes off as tunnel vision, and it can look like he's playing for himself instead of within a group. And whether it's fair or not, it really doesn't matter, because in the league, perception often becomes reality. Stunt number 3, betting on himself without control. At some point, Cam Thomas made a decision that changed how teams would deal with him going forward, and it had nothing to do with what he was doing on the court. He turned down a multi-year deal in Brooklyn and chose to bet on himself, which on the surface is something players do all the time when they believe they're capable of more. But that kind of decision only works when you control your situation, and that's the part he never really had, because once he turned down that deal, his value became tied directly to opportunity. He needed consistent minutes, consistent touches, and a defined role to prove he was worth more, but at the same time, the team he was playing for weren't in a position to guarantee him any of that. So now he's stuck in a position where he needs the ball to raise his value, and he needs minutes, but the team he's on aren't built to give him that responsibility and aren't inclined to help him prove them wrong either, which creates hesitation before he even steps on the court. From a team's perspective, you're looking at a player who wants a bigger role and a bigger contract, but you're not fully convinced he fits within what you're building long term, so the risks start to outweigh the reward. If you give him that opportunity and he produces, now you have to make a financial decision you weren't planning on making, and if he doesn't, then you've taken touches away from players you're actually trying to develop. That's why the commitment never comes, and once Brooklyn, the team that drafted him and had the most time to evaluate him, decided not to lock him up long term, it sent a message to the rest of the league about how to approach him moving forward. From that point on, he wasn't viewed as a player you build around, but as someone you bring in to test, evaluate, and move on from if it doesn't fit quickly. And when you combine that with the fact that he still needs real opportunity to show his full value, it creates a cycle where every situation becomes temporary, every role feels conditional, and instead of growing into something stable, he's constantly trying to prove himself in environments that were never designed for him to fully succeed in the first place. It's actually a sad reality for a player like Cam, but that's the risk when you don't take that first opportunity. All in all, Cam Thomas is one of those players who exposes how the NBA actually works more than anything else, because when you look at his situation on the surface, it doesn't make sense. A player who can clearly score at a high level, who has already shown he can take over games, yet still hasn't found a stable place in the league. But when you step back and look at everything together, the draft position, the role he was placed in, the way he plays, and the contract decisions he's made, it starts to come into focus. This was never just about talent, it was about alignment. He's a scorer who needs freedom, but has spent his career in situations that required control. He believes in his ability enough to bet on himself, but hasn't been in a position to fully cash in on that belief. And until those two things meet somewhere in the middle, this is probably what his career continues to look like. Still talented, still capable, but never fully settled into the role that allows everything to come together consistently. Salute, much respect, but for these reasons, his growth is being stunted. It's your boy JC Stunted Growth, and I'm out.